The following is Section 1 of Part 1, Non-Contradiction and Self-Evident First Truths. There is sometimes confusion in the minds of many of us when we are called upon to decide on circumstances which may present themselves to us from time to time. Usually, the confusion arises from either a lack of certitude about the matter before us, or an uncertainty about how to exercise whatever it is in us that functions to render decisions at all. Each of us may possess the power to do so, but if one lacks the ability to use the power, he is left ineffective in making use of it. For instance, someone may have possession of a musical instrument such as a piano, but if he lacks the knowledge of music and the talent necessary to properly play a piano, then although he may have the power to learn these things, he cannot apply that power until he acquires the skill by which that power can move to the accomplishment of that goal. It is the same with the use of the mind in both knowing and judging, for none of us can make accurate judgments about things of which we are ignorant. But if we are ignorant of how to properly use the very power in us that knows and judges, then we are fundamentally handicapped in doing so. But just as we had to first learn to crawl before we can walk, we must begin with what lesser things we can do before we can go on to do that which is greater and therefore more difficult, until we acquire the skill required to accomplish it with ease. So in that worthy pursuit we can embark upon a quest for an understanding of ourselves and the world around us, an understanding which, like myself, you may be eager to undertake in order to face the many challenges which confront all of us as we proceed through this life towards some end that we hope will benefit both ourselves and our neighbors, an end which is most fitting to our very nature. But what is that nature? And what exactly is that end? How do we approach that end, and how do we attain it? What is the correct path to its attainment? And where do we look to discover both this end and the means to obtaining it? And, lastly, in this pursuit, where do we begin? I am sure that you would agree that we should begin with what comes first. Before any answer there proceeds a question, because what is yet to be known is naturally acquired by some inquiry. And the first question ought to be, what is the right question? Well, to ask that, we must already know something, or we could not even ask the question. So there must be something within us which can first ask the question, some power to do so. But what is that power? How does it operate? So there are some things which we already know, and that we may use as a foundation to evaluate or consider anything at all. Certain basic things, certain first principles that no other human being has taught us. And a principle is the first term of a thing, as every principle is that which comes first before whatever follows from it, just as the foundation is necessary to any structure which rests upon it, such that if one were to remove that foundation, the structure could not stand. And the word itself comes from the Latin principium, meaning first in origin. So what are those first principles upon which all of our judgments about anything at all must rest in order to hold up? For in order for us to know anything else, everything which we propose as a principle of knowledge must follow from these principles. And if those propositions conflict with these first principles, they must be discarded as unfounded, since they are contrary to this sound and necessary foundation. To continue to build some presumed structure of knowledge without this foundation would be only to add to that which has already collapsed, to compound waste with waste. Now, to clarify these first principles, it may be helpful to pose them as questions in order to establish some initial perspective. Does not each of us innately know the first self-evident principle, that something cannot be and not be at the same time and in the same way? Also, that anything whole and composed of parts cannot be greater than the sum of its parts, even though it is greater than each part. That nothing greater in act and principle can come from something lesser in act and principle. You may already be aware that these fundamentals are rightly called principles of non-contradiction and self-evident truths, and I suppose that it may be obvious to you why they are called that. We shall continue this in the second section of Part 1.